Right now, two superpowers are fighting over a country most Americans can't find on a map, and whoever wins could reshape the entire global economy. Malaysia. A nation of 34 million people squeezed between Thailand and Indonesia. Doesn't sound like much, right? But here's what'll blow your mind. Malaysia controls something both the US and China desperately need, and losing access to it could cripple their tech industries overnight. If you've ever wondered why your smartphone costs what it does, or why gas prices swing wildly, this small Southeast Asian nation holds more answers than you think. But wait. Before we dive into this geopolitical powder keg, please subscribe to ensure that you never miss out on the global shifts that actually affect your wallet, your tech, and your future. Comment, "I subscribe," below, and I will personally welcome you to our community. With that said, let's get started. Let me show you why Malaysia has become the most dangerous chess piece on the global board. Meet Captain Zhang Wei. For 23 years, he's navigated cargo ships through the Malacca Strait, a narrow waterway between Malaysia and Indonesia that's just 1.5 miles wide at its tightest point. Every time I pass through, Zhang says, I'm carrying $2.3 million worth of goods through the world's most valuable 500 miles of water. Here's the insane part. 40% of global trade passes through the Malacca Strait. That's $3.4 trillion worth of goods every single year, according to the Maritime Institute of Malaysia's 2023 report. Think about that. Nearly half of everything bought and sold on Earth squeezes through this single bottleneck. Your iPhone? Probably passed through Malaysian waters. That shirt you're wearing? Same thing. And if this strait closes for just 1 week, global shipping costs could spike by 300%. Your Amazon packages? Delayed by months. Gas prices? Through the roof. But here's what should terrify both Washington and Beijing. 80% of China's oil imports pass through Malaysian-controlled waters, according to a 2024 Center for Strategic Studies report. China's entire economy, their factories, their cities, their military, runs on oil that flows past Malaysian shores every single day. The US knows this. China knows this. And Malaysia? They're sitting on the ultimate leverage. But geography is just the beginning. What Malaysia manufactures is even more critical. Look at your phone right now. Go ahead, pick it up. There's a 60% chance a component inside it was tested and packaged in Malaysia. Sarah Chen knows this better than anyone. She's a 34-year-old engineer at Intel's massive facility in Penang, Malaysia's tech hub. Every month, she oversees the testing of 12 million semiconductor chips. If our facility shuts down for 48 hours, Sarah reveals, Apple, Dell, and Samsung all feel it within a week. Here's the number that should make your jaw drop. Malaysia controls 13% of global semiconductor testing and packaging. That's an $87 billion industry, according to the Semiconductor Industry Association's 2024 data. Now, you might be thinking, wait, doesn't Taiwan make all the chips? Here's what's wild. Malaysia doesn't make the chips. Taiwan does that. But without Malaysian facilities testing and packaging those chips, they're worthless. You can't put an untested chip in a smartphone. It could catch fire, corrupt data, or just not work at all. So every chip designed in America, manufactured in Taiwan, or used in China passes through Malaysian hands for final verification. The US gets this. That's why the CHIPS Act, that $52 billion law designed to bring semiconductor manufacturing back to America, that's why it was passed. To reduce dependence on Asia. But here's the problem. Even with $52 billion, 7 out of 10 major US tech companies still rely on Malaysian testing facilities. Because you can't just build this infrastructure overnight. It takes decades of expertise, billions in equipment, and a workforce that knows what they're doing. China's in the same boat. They're trying to build domestic semiconductor testing, but they're 5 to 7 years behind Malaysia's capabilities. So both superpowers need Malaysia's tech infrastructure. But there's a resource war happening that's even more intense. Ever heard of neodymium? What about dysprosium? Probably not. But without these elements, we don't have electric cars. We don't have wind turbines. We don't have the precision-guided missiles the U.S. military depends on. They're called rare earth elements, and a 2023 U.S. Geological Survey found that Malaysia holds 30,000 metric tons of rare earth reserves. Ahmad Rashid has watched this resource race firsthand. He's a mining consultant in Kuantan, a coastal city where Malaysia's largest rare earth processing plant operates. Over the last 18 months, Ahmad watched Chinese companies invest $2.1 billion in Malaysian rare earth processing. They're not just buying our resources, Ahmad explains. They're buying our future energy independence. Here's the global picture. China controls 70% of rare earth processing worldwide. 70%. They have a near monopoly. But Malaysia? Malaysia is becoming the only major alternative outside Chinese control. If you're worried about the green energy transition, here's the uncomfortable truth. Without rare earths, there are no electric cars at scale, no wind farms, no solar panels powering cities. And right now, China could cut off the world's supply anytime they want. The Pentagon knows this. In 2024, they designated Malaysian rare earth facilities as critical to national security and offered $340 million in partnership funding to help Malaysia expand production. It's not charity. It's survival. Because if China controls rare earths and Malaysia sides with Beijing, the U.S. green energy future collapses. Their military technology stalls. They lose the next industrial revolution. But here's where it gets messy, because Malaysia is playing both sides. Okay, put yourself in Malaysia's shoes for a second. China, your largest trading partner, is offering you billions in infrastructure investments. High-speed rail, new ports, gleaming highways. The United States, the world's most powerful military, is offering security guarantees, defense partnerships, and access to the most advanced weapon systems on Earth. What do? Pick one and lose the other? Malaysia's Prime Minister, Anwar Ibrahim, has a different answer. In a leaked 2024 cabinet meeting, he reportedly said, "We will not choose. We will profit from both." And that's exactly what they're doing. In 2024 alone, Malaysia signed $43 billion in infrastructure deals with China and $17 billion in defense and tech agreements with the U.S. They're taking Chinese money to build their ports. And they're using American weapons to defend those same ports. Here's a perfect example. In 2023, the U.S. asked Malaysia to restrict Huawei 5G equipment, citing national security concerns, saying Huawei could be used for Chinese espionage. Malaysia's response? They awarded Huawei a $2 billion network contract. And then, just 3 months later, they hosted the largest joint U.S.-Malaysian naval exercises in a decade. According to the ASEAN Strategic Report published in 2024, Malaysia is the only Southeast Asian nation increasing economic ties with China while simultaneously deepening military cooperation with the U.S. It's a brilliant strategy, if you can pull it off. Malaysia has become incredibly wealthy from this balancing act. GDP growth has averaged 5.3% over the last 3 years, even as global growth slowed to 2.8%. But here's the catch, they've also become incredibly vulnerable. Because when you're playing both sides, eventually someone forces you to choose. Right now, both superpowers are quietly building leverage over Malaysia. And the tactics? Ruthless. Let's start with the U.S. In 2023, leaked State Department memos revealed that American diplomats threatened to restrict Malaysian palm oil exports, a $19 billion industry, unless Malaysia limited Chinese military access to its ports. Palm oil might not sound like a big deal, but Malaysia is the world's second largest producer. Hundreds of thousands of Malaysian jobs depend on it. Now flip to China's playbook. Li Mei runs a mid-sized manufacturing business in Johor, Malaysia's southernmost state. She employs 400 people making electronics components for Chinese factories. In 2024, she received what she describes as a suggestion from her Chinese partners: relocate her entire operation to mainland China if Malaysia chose American interests over regional partnerships. Translation: move to China or lose all your contracts. I would have lost everything, Li says. My business, 400 jobs, my family's future. This is the same playbook that's already split the Philippines, Vietnam, and Indonesia between US and Chinese spheres of influence. And here's the scary stat. A 2024 Brookings Institution study found that 67% of Malaysian businesses now operate under implicit geopolitical conditions from either US or Chinese partners. Think about that. 2/3 of Malaysian companies can't make business decisions freely anymore. They have to consider which superpower they'll anger. Imagine building your entire business, your family's future, only to have it held hostage by powers 5,000 miles away. So what happens if Malaysia picks the wrong side, or refuses to pick at all? There are only 3 ways this ends. And 2 of them are catastrophic. In this future, Malaysia accepts China's Belt and Road investments at full scale. New ports, high-speed rail connecting to China, massive infrastructure upgrades. China gains total control of the Malacca Strait, rare earth supply chains, and semiconductor testing facilities. The US loses 40% of its tech manufacturing reliability overnight. But Malaysia? Sure, they get infrastructure. They also get debt. And potentially military occupation. Remember Sri Lanka's Hambantota port? China loaned Sri Lanka $1.4 billion to build it. Sri Lanka couldn't repay the loan. So in 2017, China took control of the port on a 99-year lease. It's not a loan anymore. It's a takeover with paperwork. Malaysia could be next. And once China controls Malaysian ports, they control the Malacca Strait. Game over for US influence in Southeast Asia. In this timeline, Malaysia accepts full US military and economic partnership. More naval bases. More defense contracts. Complete alignment with Washington. The US secures critical supply chains. Rare earths flow to American companies. Semiconductors get tested in US-aligned facilities. But Malaysia loses its largest trading partner. China accounts for 18% of all Malaysian trade. That evaporates overnight. Economic recession. Job losses in Chinese-funded industries. Entire cities built around Chinese investment go dark. And China retaliates. We've seen this before. In 2020, Australia publicly called for an investigation into COVID-19's origins. China responded by slapping tariffs on Australian wine, barley, coal, and beef. Cost to Australia? $19 billion in lost exports. Malaysia's economy is far more dependent on China than Australia's ever was. If China retaliates against Malaysia, the damage could be double or triple. This is the current path. And in the short term, it's brilliant. Maximum profit, maximum flexibility. But long term? There's a historical pattern here that should terrify Malaysian leaders. When war games turn real, neutral countries become battlegrounds. Belgium tried to stay neutral in World War I. Germany invaded them anyway. Poland tried to balance between Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia. They got carved in half. Ukraine tried to balance between NATO and Russia. We saw how that ended. Malaysia is hoping they can thread the needle, that they're valuable enough to both sides that neither will force their hand. But hope isn't a strategy. So which future is Malaysia heading toward? The answer is already being written. While you've been watching this video, Malaysia has made 3 moves most analysts missed. In November 2024, Malaysia quietly signed a digital sovereignty agreement with Singapore and Indonesia. Sounds boring, right? It's not. This agreement creates a Southeast Asian tech bloc, independent of U.S. cloud services and Chinese data infrastructure. It's a third option that didn't exist 6 months ago. Malaysia has been stockpiling rare earth reserves. In 2024, they limited rare earth exports by 8%. They're not selling to the highest bidder anymore. They're building strategic reserves. Why? Because in a resource war, the country with the stockpile has the leverage. The Malaysian military has been upgrading with both US and Chinese equipment. They're flying American F/A-18 Super Hornets and sailing in Chinese-built naval vessels. They're not choosing a side. They're preparing to defend their neutrality by force if necessary. Dr. Kishore Mahbubani, former president of the UN Security Council, said this about Malaysia in 2024. Malaysia is writing the playbook for how small nations survive superpower rivalry. And here's what makes this so important. Malaysia isn't just fighting for itself. If Malaysia can pull this off, if they can stay independent while both superpowers need them, they prove that small countries can still control their own destiny in a world dominated by giants. But if they fail, if they're forced to choose, or worse, if they become a proxy battleground, then every other small nation watches and learns. Independence is impossible. Pick a master and hope they're kind. So here's what I want to know. If you were Malaysia, would you risk everything to stay neutral, align with the US for security, or take China's money and hope for the best? And here's the real question no one's asking. What happens when the US and China stop competing and start collaborating? Would Malaysia become irrelevant overnight, or even more valuable as the bridge between them? Drop your answer in the comments. I'm reading every single one, and I'll pin the most interesting take. Because in 2025, Malaysia isn't just watching history unfold, they're deciding it.